Welcome to the Never Ending Backlog podcast, your place for short reviews from a gamer with the goal of reducing his backlog. From adventures to sandboxes, join our host as we walk through a collection of unplayed treasures. Now, let's take a look at the featured game of this episode of the Never Ending Backlog.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Never Ending Backlog podcast. I am your host, Zach. And today, for our first episode, I'm going to kind of do a little synopsis of what you can expect from this podcast, who this podcast is for, and a little bit about myself. And we'll jump right into our very first game review today, which is One Screen Platformer, which is found on the Steam library for computer. So first and foremost, as you probably already could tell, this is a review bite-sized podcast. And essentially what it's going to be based around is I have about 1,500 plus games in my Steam library that have zero playtime. And my goal is to knock them all out and do short little reviews. Now, obviously, that's a lot of content. It's also a lot of video games. So essentially what I'm planning on doing is basically installing Monday through Friday, install the game, do about an hour to 2 hour playtime, and then do a 10 to 15 minute review on each game. And then, like I said, it'll be Monday through Friday, so the weekends I'll have more time off if I want to dedicate more time to gaming, editing, and so on and so forth, so it doesn't get overwhelming. So basically, that's pretty much the gist of it. It's for PC gamers, any type of gamer, really. I'll likely do other reviews. I do have other consoles. I am also a big fan of PC big box games. So, you know, the physical actual collections. I have quite a few vintage ones. I have an old vintage computer that I also play on. So maybe we'll throw those in there once in a while when I'm feeling up for it. And then basically, I think that's pretty much the big gist of it. A little bit myself is, you know, I am a gamer. I have done podcasts for work and professionally, but I've never really done one for myself. And I thought this would be a really cool goal-oriented podcast to really just knock out those 1,500 games. And I'm sure as I'm recording, I'll probably buy more and I'll probably have more content, which is awesome. And really, I just wanted to jump right into it. I've never really was a big fan of video editing. I think I'm a little bit too much of a perfectionist where I'll spend probably days editing every YouTube video. So I felt like podcasts would be the best medium for me. And I also enjoy listening to podcasts as long as they're shorter. I don't have a huge attention span. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much what you can expect from this podcast. 10 to 15 minute reviews on PC games. Every title will be the game that I'm reviewing. I probably will have guests here and there. I do know some game developers, some, game marketers and other people that are in the industry that I think would be fun. It'd also be really awesome to actually interview some of the developers as I'm reviewing their games. Since a lot of the games that I purchased are from Humble Bundle and Bundle Stars, a lot of them are indies. So I think there's a high opportunity that I could probably get some of the developers to join us on the podcast. So a lot of cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do with this. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. The first game I reviewed is One Screen Platformer. So the game premise is basically a 2D side-scrolling platforming adventure game. Essentially, you basically hit checkpoints as quickly as possible and be creative about how you do it. Think of it as actually it's an interesting principle. It's similar to like a free roaming game. So think like Far Cry and Grand Theft Auto, but in side-scrolling and in a much smaller format. There are 4 characters you can choose from, at least as the time of this recording. Each character has a special ability. Some of them, can double jump. Some of them can destroy blocks to allow you to navigate the map easier to hit all the checkpoints. And there are tons of traps to kill you. It's a pretty interesting game. It's a fun little one. It's very small. It's 112 megabytes installed on my computer. It's massive. It's incredibly tiny, which I think is really cool. You do complete the levels and then you get a letter rank. And whenever I see letter ranks, I immediately go back to my number one favorite game of all time, which is Crazy Taxi. Crazy Taxi for the arcade was one of my favorite machines. I mean, that got me into arcade collecting, which, little tidbit, that's something I really enjoy doing as well. So yeah, I think the game premise is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The reason I actually got this game, I believe I got it in a Humble Bundle, but interesting thing about my computer setup is I've always been a big fan of triple monitor setups that share the same resolution. So NVIDIA Surround, ATI Eyefinity, those are big things that I've always really thoroughly enjoyed. And I was really hoping that, a one screen platformer would allow you to take full advantage of my resolution. So it'd be like a 5760 by 1080p resolution, which I think would be wicked. I think it'd be a really cool thing to see all three monitors play the games. And there are some games that do it. Craft the World, I believe is what the name of it is. It's a dwarf building game. Takes full advantage of all three monitors, and it does it in a really slick way where it doesn't distort the aspect ratio, which is really nice. And this game totally could. I mean, 2D games traditionally work really well on three monitor setups because, well, they're 2D. That there's not a lot of skewing perspectives. Like first-person shooters struggle massively. But unfortunately, this is an indie game. Probably wasn't developed heavily on three monitor setups all along the way I'm using it. So I understand why I didn't have it. I was just kind of bummed. There are ways you can mod services, not to get too far off track. So you can do like widescreen game fix, and there's a couple other things where you can mess around with files. Unfortunately, I've had terrible experiences with this. I actually had a widescreen fixer. It's an application that runs in the background, and it was correcting my experience for Call of Duty. I believe it was probably one of the Black Ops, actually, which actually will pop up in an episode later on. But needless to say, the servers through Activision actually saw that I was running a third-party service, thought I was hacking the system, which, I mean, I understand their principle of why they did it. So they put a VAC ban on my Steam account. It's my very first and only one I've ever had. And since then, I have never run a third-party service. So basically either A, deal with terrible resolution, or if the game just doesn't work with my monitor setup, I'll run it at my center monitor and leave the other two monitors to just be black screens. So there's my bad experience. So I will not run modders with any games, unfortunately. I wish more games would support 5760 by 1080. I think it's a really cool technology. I understand it's not always the most practical for people, especially when you have like the bars in the center of the monitors. But overall, I think it's a really cool experience. So I ran the game in 1920 by 1080, black screens on both sides. The graphics are pixelated. It's kind of a trend now. A lot of people are doing that, and I think it's cool. It kind of goes back to the root of what gaming was all built for. It's more about the gameplay and less about the graphics. Other than that, the graphics are pretty basic. I've seen better, cleaner pixelated games. So like Hammerwatch, Magicites, Stardew Valley, those games have a cleaner pixelated graphics. And you might think like there's just that's crazy. Like they're pixelated games. They all look the same. They don't. There are definitely some pixelated games that look better than others that have been more optimized for pixels. So graphic-wise, nothing to write home about. Relatively easy. Like I said, it's only 112 megabytes and it doesn't require much from your computer. So if you have a kind of a lower performing computer and you enjoy 2D side-scrolling checkpoint collecting games, it's probably the perfect one for you. Gameplay, controls are pretty straightforward. I played it on a keyboard, and that was miserable. I would definitely recommend a controller. They're not challenging buttons. There's not really a lot of buttons you have to worry about. But you have to be precise with jumping because, like I said, there's a lot of traps. There's spikes on the roof. There's spikes on the ground. There's fireballs. There's just a ton of things that are trying to kill you and stop you from getting a perfect time of collecting all these checkpoints. So you really need that preciseness. And although 9 out of 10 times I would always recommend a keyboard, I think in this situation it would work better for a controller, which leads me to believe that it might be actually out on game consoles because I think it'd work really well with those. Otherwise, I've earned 7 achievements. I played it for about 12 minutes. There's 90 achievements total, so I earned 7 within 12 minutes. So it's not super challenging. The first run through I played as the miner. I got a D rank, which is pretty awful. I died a ton. It's interesting playing the space miner. I think they call him a void miner or something along those lines. It's a cool person because they can destroy blocks. Only certain blocks. You can't destroy all blocks. So that made it a little bit easier in some regards, but it also made it challenging because you sometimes destroy blocks you didn't want to destroy. Maybe you wanted to jump on that block and you just destroyed it. And once the block's gone, it's done. So that path may be ruined. There is no direct one path. Your goal is to hit all the checkpoints. So you might go in order. You might go all the way to the end and work backwards. You might hit them all sporadically. I can tell you right now, it's my first time playing. I hit it completely sporadically. There was no rhyme or reason to what I did. And I knew that going into it. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I also fidgeted around with graphics a lot, trying to see if I can get the 5760 to work, but unfortunately I did not. Overall, it was fun. It was a challenge without a doubt. There were multiple times where I jump into the same fireball about a dozen or so times, and it's just like spawn, die, spawn, die, spawn, die. And it's like, okay, all right. So I need to move him like 1 centimeter to the left, and I won't have to worry about doing this anymore. For a game kind of economy, I always try to jump over and at least talk about this stuff. Right now, you can buy it. There's a website called isthereanydeal.com. And basically what it is it reviews all these game services. So Steam, Ubisoft, and Uplay, and Epic, and GOG, and all the third-party services like Humble Bundle as well. And it basically tries to find deals for those games. I highly recommend. Check it out. If there's a game, a PC game that you're like, I really want to buy this, check it out on there first. You might actually find a better deal for it than what you had expected. So I would highly check it out there. They also give you kind of history of pricing. So right now you can find best price for 49 cents, which is, great. But it goes between 49 cents and $2.99. So needless to say, it's a relatively cheap game. It is an indie developer. I believe I actually ended up getting mine in the Humble Bundle or Fanatical Bundle, either one of those. So for my final review, kind of just touching base on this, it was a fun game. It was shorter, without a doubt. It was frustrating. I think, it's meant to be frustrating. The developer itself, his name is Return to Adventure Mountain. I've noticed they've been very active on Steam, so lots of updates and releases. He actually released a birthday for his 40th birthday, a release for it, which is awesome, which added additional content. And for a game that's 112 megabytes, that's a pretty cool commitment to that type of game. I know he's planning on making more, he said. And he has a couple other games out there, a zombie game as well. So I would definitely check it out. I think it's a fun one. If you enjoy challenging games and you enjoy games that are, based on the perfectionist in you, so you're like, I need to get the top rank. I need to hit everything in the correct order. And it's kind of along the lines of speedrunning as well. Like, you need to just do it until you get exactly what you need to, your objective. I think it's perfect for you. I'm not ever going to give a full, it's a 4-star game out of 5 stars. I'm not going to do that simply for a few reasons. One, I don't have time because personally I have many games that I play. So Scrap Mechanic is one I've been playing heavily. It's made by the same developers that made Raft, which is a great survival building game, and it works phenomenally in co-op. Scrap Mechanic is much more impressive in the sense that there's a lot more complexities to it compared to Raft. And Raft is actually a pretty complex game, but it's still pretty fun to jump into. My daughter happens to just love Raft, rightfully so. It's absolutely addicting and beautiful, may I add. But Scrap Mechanic, like I said, since it's more complex, it took me about 2 hours of thinking, I'm going to probably drop this game. This game is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm very disappointed. And then after the 2 hour mark, it's like, okay, I actually get why this game is operating the way it does. This makes perfect sense. So if I was only going to play Scrap Mechanic for 1 to 2 hours, I would have probably given it a 1 or 2 star review. And that's not fair. I obviously didn't dedicate enough time to it. So for these reviews, since I'll be playing each game 1 to 2 hours, because let's be honest, it's 1,500, probably closer to 2,000 games that I have to get through at one point in my life, I don't have time to dedicate to the installing, setup, maintenance, recording the podcast, maybe playing it for 5 to 10 hours to really get the full effect. And so basically mine will be almost judging a book by its cover. I'm going to try it at least. But my main review is going to be a very simple one, which is I'm going to review kind of, what I thought about it, what the graphics were, how it ran, how the developers act, the pricing and stuff like that. But I'm also going to say, am I going to keep this game installed on my computer or am I going to delete it? Now, obviously with that many games, I can't keep all of them installed, and nor does it make any sense to. If there's a game that I'm never going to play again, I'm going to delete it and just save up space for maybe another game. So my review is keep it or delete it. And unfortunately for this game, I am going to delete it. Now, that's not to say that this is a bad game. It's actually a pretty well done indie developer game. However, the game type's not really meant for me as much. I am not a perfectionist. I have friends that I need to get every achievement. I need to get every trophy. I need to unlock everything for this game. And I have tons of friends that way. I have friends that played Resident Evil 2 well over 100 times. And they've beaten it countlessly. to play it on extreme difficulty with just using a knife and all these other weird rules and strategies. And for me, that's just not me. I can't do the same thing over and over again as much in these type of games. So for me, I'm going to delete it. I'd highly recommend it for any type of completionist or perfectionist to actually give it a try. If you're trying to get some more achievements, like I said, I got 7 of them within 12 minutes. It's pretty good. You'll bump up your Steam profile a little bit. So that's what you're trying to get out of it. 49 cents to $2.99. It's not a bad run. So that's pretty much, the big review there on this one. This is our very first episode, so I hope to, get it polished out. If you hear background noises here and there, I am closer to my computer, and I do have a humidifier or like a dehumidifier fan running next to me. So I can't really turn that off, unfortunately. It is actually maintained by our community that we live in, and there's no switch. It just kicks on when the humidity gets so high, so it keeps like the basement from getting, humid and gross. So I understand the purpose. It's frustrating when I'm trying to record something. I did buy a sound dampener, which is what I'm using currently, so hopefully it masks quite a bit of the sound. It sounds like it is, so that's promising. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the very first episode. So this will be released on Monday. This podcast will. The next game, and basically, if you're curious how I'm picking this out, it is highly random. However, there are a couple criteria that I have. And one is I'm trying to do a game. So like I have quite a few games that are numbered. I have a lot of games that start with the letter A and B and so on and so forth. So basically I'm just choosing the first one of the numbered one, which is One Screen Platformer was the very first one I had. And then A, I'll get the first one in A, B, C, D. I might throw some other ones on there if they're like topical, or if maybe my friend recommended that I do it, or if you guys listen to something, you're like, hey, I would be interested in this game, not necessarily want to buy it yet, but can you do a review on it? This is not just indie games. I have tons of different games. It's basically games that have no playtime, and there are a ton. So I can tell you right now, later on this week, I'm planning on doing Call of Duty Black Ops, I think 2, I think is the one I'm playing. I've played all the Call of Duty Black Ops in excessive amounts, absolutely. I have not played the computer ones as much because A, I got that VAC ban, so it holds a salty taste in my mouth. B, I like it on console because my friends have relatively terrible internet, and computer just seems to always take up more of the internet. So when you jump on console, it works better for us. And for C, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I pretty much play Call of Duty for multiplayer. I don't really play the storyline as much. I appreciate the storyline. I've tried it a few times here and there, but storyline games for first-person shooters are really hard for me. Halo seems to really catch my interest, but other ones just, they really don't as much. So for Call of Duty Black Ops 2, I think it's 2, then I'm going to play the storyline instead, because I don't think you really need a review of the multiplayer. You probably know what it's like. If you played any of the other Call of Duties, it's pretty much the same way. They change up some things here and there. But yeah, that's pretty much how that's going to be working, is I'm going to try to play the single player aspects of most of these games. I might mention stuff like, hey, I jumped in the multiplayer server. There's like one person playing, because I have those experiences a lot. Battlefield Bad Company 2 is one of my favorite first-person shooter games, and those lobbies are dead, unfortunately. There are still some, hardcore groups that are sticking around, and I really appreciate you guys gaming along, but it gets a little frustrating sometimes because I understand, you move on past it, but Bad Company 2 has held up very well still to this day, and it still deserves some attention here and there. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you tune back in tomorrow for our next episode. We'll be starting with the letter A. I will probably skip some games here and there. Like I said, if it's got more than an hour playtime, I probably won't do a review on it, unless it's something I feel like I really want to review, or if it's maybe not the most appropriate. There are games that I have that are probably not the most appropriate to do reviews on. Either they're laid out really weird, or they're meant to be a certain way. I'm just going to avoid them, or maybe it's even like super adult content. Don't really want to jump into those type of games. So I'm going to try to be my best about being selective, keep it interesting, and also kind of keep content that you guys actually will want to hear as well. So hope you enjoyed today's podcast. The next ones will be shorter ones. This is, like I said, this is the intro, the starter one. And yeah, thank you again for joining us today, and I look forward to talking with you tomorrow.